Hello and welcome to the Smooth Scaling podcast, where we're speaking with industry experts to uncover how to design, build, and run scalable and resilient systems. I'm your host, José Quaresma, and today we had a great conversation with Sezin Cagil, Head of Unified Commerce Technology at Dr. Martens and an ambassador to the MACH Alliance. MACH, which for the ones of you listening is written MACH, stands for Microservices, API, Cloud Native, and Headless, and it enables you to easily compose a stack to fit your needs. We discussed the alignment between business and technology strategies that produce great results, the benefits of a MACH approach, but also the challenges of orchestrating such an architecture with different vendors, and we also talked about the impact of traffic peaks. Enjoy! Hi, Sezin. Welcome to the podcast.
Hello, thanks for having me.
And we're really happy to have you here. And we will be talking about MACH and the MACH architecture and the MACH Alliance. So would love to kind of maybe start by asking you, can you define MACH for us, and maybe also kind of what is the main difference between that and a composable architecture?
MACH is just an abbreviation that comes out of, microservices-based, API-first, cloud-native, and headless. Those technologies has been around for a while. MACH Alliance didn't make these technologies. They just, came together to be outspoken about the technology, to spread the technology, because they actually make our lives better, at least as a technologist, and as well for the consumer as well. They get a better experience as a result of that technology. So that is mainly what Alliance is doing, trying to spread the technology, also create a community of the technology so that these companies can work together, and it is easier for enterprise to find who to talk to, where to go, and the thought leadership, I guess, is the most important piece there, that spreads the word, that spreads the technology.
And what kind of the other part that I'm also interested in is, what about yourself? Kind of how can you tell us a little bit about your career and how you ended up interested in MACH?
It was all coincidental, to be honest. I was working in Costa Coffee, leading the UK team, and using the tech stack, of the MACH, we started to use Contentful, and as part of that work with the incredible senior engineer at the time, Jay Hoston, who put together a toolkit to build the website, and be using Content Stack and Contentful and Netlify, and we could then spin up websites in 15 minutes. We got so excited about this because we were asked to build global websites for different regions and markets. We started to promote it internally. Contentful got super excited. We went to in their town hall, and then the first MACH conference was happening at that year or the year after. They just invited us to talk about it, and I went with Gordon Lucas, who was my manager at the time, to explain what we have done. That's how I got involved with the MACH Alliance, completely coincidental. I didn't know them until Contentful introduced us to them.
So from your career, right? How would you say e-commerce has evolved? I mean, do you have some? There's some things that you can share with us on kind of from an architecture trends perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. When I first started to get involved in retail, because I worked in fintech for a while and then moved to retail, there were lots of monoliths, and I found myself in a position to move out of one monolith after, and I keep doing it. I have been doing it for the last quite a few, 8 years or so now. So I guess one of the main moves was monoliths became really expensive to run, to operate, to build over, to build features, functionalities, experiences for consumers who were demanding for more interactive, more experiential websites, or in general digital experiences. That was, I think, the main thing that shifted the enterprise from monolith to MACH architecture, where we could acquire smaller vendors, or you can buy it as a package as well, but still they are composable, so you can remove and add things as your business needs. To me, almost all the retailers in, let's say, fashion, in groceries, they would all need similar tech, but it all depends on the scale of the operation, how different it needs to be from that tech. The bigger you get, the more technology you will need. You will need to build the technology yourself. But the smaller your operation is, you can operate with the off-the-shelf technologies like Shopify, right? That's why it became so popular, because it provides all the connectivity, it provides all the technology.
How do you see that variation in terms of kind of how does that correlate with maturity, right? So I mean, do you look at MACH and kind of everyone out there using MACH architecture? Do you see them being in a spectrum of maturity, or how do you think about that?
I guess what makes MACH architecture mature is the ability of the organization to operate it. And also when they started the transformation. If they started transformation 10 years ago, they would have a mature architecture now that they might need to change actually. As technology changes, digital solutions change, and the demands from consumers change. But at least they will have the know-how, how to operate, how to build over, what to buy, what to get off the shelf, what to, customize. I think that level of knowledge within the technology department is what I would call the maturity. And maturity depends on that know-how in the business. If the business doesn't know how to operate that architecture, you can't really have it. And that is probably one of the things that you need to be careful when you are working on composable. If you go too composable to your scale, you can't operate it. You will need bigger teams, but you will need more technical domain knowledge within the organization.
Okay, so some of that, as I hear saying, please help me here, because I could be kind of misinterpreting a little bit. Is like part of it is also like maybe the smaller you are, the less need you have for so much to be asked, or more the other way. So the more kind of the bigger you get, the more it comes with it a stronger need to be more composable, and also a stronger ability to do so. Does that?
Sort of. I think you can still use the MACH architecture or MACH technologies, but whether you use one single vendor or you use multiple vendors to build a layered architecture is a different question. Even when you use one single vendor that is composable, that uses MACH architecture, you are still MACH. It doesn't change that nature.
Can you talk me through one example? Is Shopify one such an example that you've mentioned of a kind of the more?
Yeah, absolutely. Although I don't think they're actually part of the alliance, but when I look at it from afar, and I'm not here to promote anybody, I just look at it as a technologist. When I look at it from afar as a technologist, there are all these layers that they provide, and whether you use that layer or not is your decision. It is based on your business strategy, based on your business operation, tech resources available, your expertise, but they provide everything that you need to be able to operate an e-commerce business. And the bigger your operation, the more complex you are, the more global you are, based on, the regions that you support, the more separate layers you would need, the more separate, extensive capabilities you would need. Otherwise, for instance, it has a PIM already that comes with it. You can just use that. But if you have a bigger, more complex product range and operation, you would need a separate PIM that can support that complexity.
So it's about.
I guess complexity is the right word actually there. It depends on the complexity.
And maybe I don't know if it's degrees of freedom or kind of specific needs as you get bigger that maybe will not be addressed by a kind of some of the most basic MACH architecture setups, but that so you would need more freedom, more capability, for example, on the PIM side to do some more what do you call it, more customized configurations. That means that you would require to kind of.
Yeah, you might need to bring more customized or specialized solutions in place. It also depends, you might have a simple looking complex business. From outside it might be simple, but your operations might be very complex, or you might be spread across the world for whatever reason. All those things would impact the architectural decision. Technology is not separate from business. It supports the business. It will follow the business.
Ideally. Yes.
I guess that is another problem with Monolith, right? Because it cannot move as fast as the changes in the business. You then need to move to a MACH architecture where you can then start to have that modularity. You can then start to make decisions.
Yeah, I see that. And can you give us an example of some of the more, maybe the more complex MACH architecture setup? I mean, I don't know if you can give a specific one or kind of talk a bit generic. Yeah.
I guess we can talk at a high level. Yeah, definitely. Let's start from where consumer starts, like the front end. You always want that front end layer to be unique to you. It is all brand driven. It is all depending on the tone of voice that you are using. So that layer is generally completely separately done. But you need a content management system, CMS, to power that layer so that your business teams, content teams can go and update that content regularly, instantaneously, without having to go through the development team. You would then have a product range that will come through an e-commerce engine. That e-commerce engine would probably attach to, depending on the scale again, to a PIM, product management layer, where you have all the attributes and details that would then connect to an order management system that of course gets the orders and delivers them, which would also then talk to warehouse management system, because that's where all the products are packed and sent, shipped. You might need a consumer data platform, because again, there are lots of consumers working in your or using your technologies. You would want to keep the data to be able to provide personalized experiences, especially in today's world. And that data layer would then become really beneficial for you in the future when you start to use AI a little bit more. I mean, of course, this is the layers that business and the customers use. You then have reporting, analytics, alerting, monitoring, endless. There are quite a few different layers that we need to look after to operate an e-commerce business.
Yeah, and I could imagine that, and it's I draw a parallel there with the kind of with microservices, and it's somewhat, I think, kind of aligned there. That I could imagine that then you have all those different composable components in that architecture, but then I could imagine it being quite complex to orchestrate all that and orchestrate all the vendors. And can you talk a little bit about that?
Definitely. I think that is, again, as you start to go modular, that is where the maturity of the technical teams actually matter. If you have too many vendors, too many different products within your technical tech stack, the bigger the team you need to be able to manage it, just to manage the system. You also need to be able to get the best out of those systems. So you need operational teams who would demand, features, functionality out of those systems, so that orchestration, both in terms of system management, in terms of technical orchestration, but also operational orchestration. You need all those business teams to be able to use the tooling that you provide to deliver the consumer experience at the front end layer. If they can't operate the tooling, if they don't know how to use it, or if technology doesn't know how to use it, then you will start to have lots of issues, especially with the scalability, where you guys sit very tightly.
I see that. And what do you have any guidance or experience on how to address that? What are kind of some of the, and I don't know if I want to call it best practices, maybe that's what it could, but what has been for you the things that really help addressing that?
I think the most important thing is really to know what your business needs. you really need to deliver to your business strategy, not just a random stack. You don't just go through, it is not a shopping list of vendors that you bring to a business, or, tooling or technology that you bring to a business. You need to understand the business deeply so that they can operate it, so that you can operate it as a technical team. If you have a team of 10, 15 people and have a huge stack, it will never work, right? You just physically don't have the hours in the day to be able to maintain, manage, operate, build over. But if you have a team that is in comparable to your tech stack, you can then operate and manage it. Orchestration becomes especially more important. Right now, we are getting closer to peak. We are constantly talking about how to manage peak, how to be prepared for it. And although, Mac architecture makes it easier because they're all cloud-based, cloud first. So it is easier to scale. It is easier to respond to peaks and demands. You still need to be aware of your peaks and demands because you don't want to run everything at its best forever, right? That costs a lot of money. So you need to have the knowledge in the team to be able to operate this cloud infrastructure, and also the data, comparable data, historic data, to say, where we would be in the coming season so that you can actually be prepared for it. And the tools like Qt or queuing mechanisms become really important for architectures where you have mishmash of Monolith and Mac. So part of the system can handle the load, but the other part cannot, which will then, although it won't necessarily take the rest of the architecture down, customers cannot use the systems. So those sort of mechanisms actually help a lot to be prepared for those peaks that you are creating yourself, right? You are creating through promotions, you are creating through marketing communications. So you have a rough idea when they will start, when it will happen.
I think when you mentioned kind of in the beginning around the make sure that you know what the business needs and you're aligned with that, it actually reminded me at some point in my another role that I was in, another job also, that we at some point built a really wonderful platform that from a technology perspective was great, but then we were like, what's going on? Why isn't anyone using it? Right? So it was kind of, I think, a little bit the reverse of that we kind of, maybe we started from the wrong side of things. Maybe we're starting to think, okay, what is kind of a great platform out there? And in the end, it was actually useful for the business, but we were just not communicating it well enough, right? So that was definitely the think about the business that will always be make your life easier, also from a technology perspective.
Yeah, that is super important. You don't need best of best all the time, and to be honest, most of the time you don't need it. But you need to have a stack that you can operate and that aligns with the business's needs.
If people are kind of considering going then from a monolithical architecture towards a Mac architecture, what would you say are the benefits that they can expect, or that they hopefully will be able to reap?
Well, the main thing is the modularity. You will have lots of modules. You will have lots of little pieces that you can release independently. So I don't know, if you want to change one single page, you can simply release that one single page. You don't need to package everything, run regressions for weeks, and then release it as a whole and then wait what happens. And that is where the technology comes from, right? That is what was best of breed at the time. And we moved away from it. And there is always this argument about Mac or Mac vendors or Mac aligned products becoming too big and becoming more monolithical. I think we lack some words. I started to call them layered products because they have different layers in it. It is still Mac. It is still microservices first, API driven. It still follows the architecture, but it has many, many layers that you might need. So I think that is fundamentally different from what a monolith is. Within a monolith, you can't do anything without touching a completely random end of the system. Whereas in Mac, you know your layers. You can operate within those layers and make the changes that you need depending on the boundaries that you have created for each module.
It's a very good point.
So the main challenge for someone, I think that's what you were asking. I derailed from the point. When you are moving away from a monolith to Mac, you really need to look into what you have in hand and whether you really want to replicate it. And most of the time, you don't want to replicate it. I think that is where companies become stuck. If you want to create exactly what we have in Mac, that will take much, much longer and that would need much more analysis. Whereas when you look into it, you will realize that there are lots of organic decisions. There are lots of pieces that you don't use anymore. You don't even know that it is there. So I always find it easier to start from where customer is and move back. See what customer is using, use your data, understand what is actually beneficial to your end user, to your business, and move those to Mac bit by bit. There might be certain pieces that are used every now and then. That is a business decision, whether you want to kill it or move it.
But when moving from Monolith to Mac, do you see it as does it require kind of a big bang transition, or do you see it more of a you can start eating out pieces of your monolith and starting kind of building where you would have a 60% part of your old monolith and start adding the components around it?
That is how I have done every single time. Started small, move the things that we can move, and also show that we can do it. That's another piece, right? In technology, there is always a concern whether it can be done or not. Gain that business trust, and also confidence for yourself as well, as you are doing for the first time. None of the teams that I worked was doing their third transformation. They were all doing it for the first time. If it is, your third, fifth, it might be more you might be more comfortable. But if it is your first, you might want to gain confidence yourself. Understand the new tech stack. Mac has been around for a long time, the technologies that Mac uses, but not every engineer uses it. So they need to learn and adopt this new world. That will also take some time.
Kind of from a kind of learning and adapting to that new world and kind of, I guess, reskilling in some aspect. What do you see being the most important skills in that new world?
Being open-minded. Just because somebody works in technology doesn't mean that they like change. Which seems contradictory, but it happens very often. Lots of engineers use the technologies that they use for a very long time. They don't necessarily want to change it. They don't necessarily want to learn a new technology. Change is scary. They are just human beings. Just because they like writing code doesn't mean that they like change again. So to me, everything is that people change. I learn, I used to appreciate it, but as I move forward in my career, I appreciate it even more. Most of the things that we do are all people related. Technology simply follows it.
That's very true. Thank you for that. Just from still on the kind of once you do start going towards that Mac architecture, right? Then I guess you might still have that thought process of, okay, I need this component. There's a build versus buy decision there, right? Do I go out there and see what is there to just buy it, or I build it myself? How do you kind of, in your experience, what is the best way to approach that decision?
We touched it a little bit at the start of this conversation. You would build something if your use case is very unique. If there is a particular reason in the business that a certain thing is done in a very, very different manner compared to the market. Other than those unique cases, I don't think you need to build much. The rest is a buy decision. But of course, then you need to consider the cost. But you also need to consider the build cost.
And do you, when you say something kind of different, do you see it? Are you thinking from a kind of a competitor advantage perspective, or are you also more thinking of I can't find any component out there that gives me this specific need? I think I at least think of it as two different ways. But is it more I can't find something as specific as what I need, so I do it myself, or do you see it's this is exactly what gives us the competitive advantage?
Yes, there could be certain cases that gives you a competitive advantage that you would want to customize. I think maybe that's another thing that you need to look into it. If considering that you are using MACH architecture, where you have APIs, where you have small layers that you can, or small modules that you can play with, can you build over what you already have? The main layer that you wouldn't want off the shelf is probably your front end experience layer, because it is very brand driven. Each brand is different, right? The visuals are different, the tone of voice is different, the dynamism is different. That layer you wouldn't just go and buy a template and use it unless you're a corner shop. But for most of the other layers, you can most of the time do it off the shelf with some customization or some changes in the way you connect systems together.
And I would like to kind of go back a little bit to the kind of the traffic peak and some of that era, of course, because I mean we that's what we love to talk about in this podcast. And I'll actually read it to make sure that I'm not that I make sure I'm naming the kind of quoting it right and naming the right people. So when doing some research, I did hear in a podcast Puma's e-commerce manager Bettina Donmes that said something around kind of that the reliability bit is the hardest thing about composable, because every vendor in composable has their strengths, but they often think in isolation, right? And I think we started touching on it, and then I threw us a little bit to the side. But I would love to get back to that. And in your experience, what is the best way? So this is kind of I guess a specific part of orchestration that you started touching on, is when you're getting ready for peak traffic. How do you think about it from all the vendors? I mean, in terms of load testing, right? Do you try to synchronize with all the vendors in the architecture, or do you do kind of load testing individually with each of them, or both? Can you share a bit about that?
I mean, each vendor would do their own exercises anyway, because everybody's getting ready for peak, right? And none of the vendors are used by one single brand. So if they are done, many brands will be done, and nobody will be impressed at the end of it. So they do their own test. But as a enterprise and brand, we do our own tests ourselves, end to end. So we work with all these vendors. We make sure that they are prepared. They know what is happening. And, of course, we don't do this in production environments. We don't do it in lower environments. The lower environments don't necessarily have the scales that you would need for peak. So you need to talk to them, make sure that they are prepared. They're aware of the load tests and, those sort of things that you are doing. So it is a whole orchestration piece that, again, you mentioned. We were touching a little bit about the orchestration of people, orchestration of vendors, orchestration of business, to make sure that we are as a whole prepared for the peak. And I am a big advocate of having good account people in the vendors. To me, that is how you choose your vendors. There are, in every single layer, there are many, many vendors. They do more or less the same thing, but it all depends. Are they, treating you the way you want to be treated? I think that is the most important piece. And for not only vendors, right? We also have lots of engineering partners. We have lots of other partners in the mix. And so, what I always say is that we work for one single brand. The rest is irrelevant. Everybody gets paid by the brand that we are working for. So we need to all align. We need to all be prepared to work with each other. And I, to be honest, most of the time don't even share who is from where. It is irrelevant.
I've been in projects like that as well, and I see your point that it is quite powerful when the focus is on the brand and what you're delivering. I think it's a very interesting approach.
Absolutely.
Still, one thing on the kind of the load test and more kind of the getting ready for peak, is in your experience, do you, because in my experience and the work that we do, there's usually a bottleneck somewhere in the architecture, right? And I mean, I guess there will always be one, right? But per definition. But do you always, in your experience, after doing the testing and all that, do you always know where the bottleneck is, and kind of and are conscious about it, or has it happened as well that you're actually surprised at some point that, well, we actually did all this testing and we thought that the bottleneck was here, but then we ran the event and it was actually over there?
Yeah, I like to think that the software is an organism. You think that exactly, you are saying, you think that you know the bottleneck, oh, this system always fails that, there's always this and that, and you run the tests, and you see the interaction of certain things just gives you a completely unexpected result. And in a way, that is the fun part of software. Although, unexpected and not the result you want, it still tells you that it has its own mind. You need to, and it is physically impossible for a technology team to know every part of a system. So these exercises are very important from that perspective as well, that it helps you to understand your system at a given time based on the business requirements you have, based on the business that you saw, or the behavior on your website or in your digital systems you saw in the previous peak and the previous activation. So you are constantly learning, constantly evaluating and evolving. And to your point, yes, once you do these tests and see that a completely random corner of the system is throwing you some headache, you then start to consider, do we need a new solution? Do we need to build something? Do we need to go and buy it off the shelf? What is happening? Do we need a new, I don't know, do we need to scale it further?
Yeah, it's the good old theory of constraints, right? You find the bottleneck, you address it, but then, as you're saying with the organism, right? You address that one, you lift that one, then something else will be under pressure, right? And the bottleneck will be there.
Yeah, absolutely. And then there's the next question, right? How long can you keep the pressure on? At one point, you will see that the system is too stressed and you need to come down. So I don't know. I find these things fun, but of course.
So when you were saying how long, my first thought was on the cost perspective, but that's not what you were thinking about, right?
Actual stress that you are introducing to the system. So say the peak, if it were to go, I don't know, you had an activation, you have a campaign, it's doing so well, it's just going on and on and on for days in a row. What happens then? You don't expect that behavior, right? You expect people to flood in, do shopping and leave. But if they are coming, especially if you have a, I don't know, global audience, they will have different time zones. So you can actually have a, global continuous peak for a period of time. Or yes, lots of small peaks, but still high at the high end of your system.
Still within the peaks, would love to hear your thoughts as well. In your previous company with Selfridges, they used Qt as their virtual waiting room. Can you share with us how did that? Which impact did it have on all this kind of the preparation and the handling of peaks?
It was actually super helpful. It is funny how we started to use Qt. We had it in this stack for a while, but it wasn't used. And business came and said that, oh, they have a amazing celebrity activation happening in 3 days. And I was like, okay, thanks for telling me. Oh, great to know. And you're like, okay, what do we do? So we have Qt, but it wasn't integrated at all. And we had to do it literally in 3 days. It was, again, great fun, but a bit unexpected. But it behaved as exactly the way you wanted to behave, which is the beauty of these new technologies. You can simply integrate it without doing a lot of hard work, and it will start working easily. That also touches my point about the account and deciding who you want to work with. If you are working with a company who is not willing to support you when you need support, that doesn't really work. Especially in retail, where things are really quick, responsive, and very seasonal. Business doesn't necessarily do these things out of fun. they come up with these ideas because they need to come up with these ideas, and it is our job as a team, both internal, external, whoever, third, fourth, fifth parties, to come together to try to find a solution.
It's a good point, and I think I'm sure that there was a good reason that they only told you 3 days before and not 1 month before, right? We would love infinite time for doing all the preparation, right? But that's just not the reality.
Yeah, absolutely.
I would love to. I think we're getting close to wrap up. Are you ready for a couple of rapid fire questions? So don't think too much about them. Just share your thoughts with us. So is there some content research, could be a book, a podcast, a thought leader that you would recommend?
There are quite a few, actually. I do love HBR. All their content, I find it really helpful. I found them helpful at any stage of my career. They touch everything. From MACH, I really like Sana Remeki's thought leadership, the things that she comes up with, the content that she produces. And in terms of IT and content, IT Revolution is fantastic. Jean Kim and that group who, brought Dora, who brought lots of new ways of working, new ways of thinking together.
Yeah, and I mean, I think a lot of the books that they publish as well as kind of that they support are also very good. I mean, there's some of those books that I think changed me definitely, but changed the industry as well. So that's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. Do you have, again, if you were to give some professional advice, either to your younger self or someone starting in kind of, could be specifically in e-commerce retail these days, do you have any advice that you would give to them?
I would say be curious. You need to always be curious about the domain, about the customers, the products, the ecosystem you're in. I am also a big believer of being intentional. You need to really have an intentional approach to what to learn, where to look for. You need to have an idea of what you want to achieve. And, I think when you bring these things together, always consider your end user. You will definitely deliver good value.
Thank you. Last question. To you, scalability is?
Is ability for a system to behave without you touching it in the right manner. That was a strange sentence, but
No, it was very good. I love that different people will kind of react to these questions in different ways. Some go towards the is hard, is complicated, but I love that you went towards the definition and kind of when do you see that one is scalable, right? So appreciate that. I think it was a very useful approach to answering it. Thank you. And I think we're wrapping up. So thank you so much, Sezin, for joining us. I appreciated learning about your journey and the MACH architecture as well, and understanding a little bit more about the e-commerce world. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. I had a great conversation, great fun. Thank you.
Wonderful. And that's it for this episode of the Smooth Scaling podcast. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed, consider subscribing and perhaps share it with a friend or colleague. If you want to share any thoughts or comments with us, send them to smoothscaling@kiwit.com. This podcast is researched by Joseph Thwaites, produced by Perseo Mandilo, and brought to you by Kiwit, your virtual waiting room partner. I'm your host, José Quaresma. Until next time, keep it smooth, keep it scalable.